Maxine Pfeifer. I am going to be 92 on March 1st. I was born in Mobridge, South Dakota, and I was the third child of my parents. And this 1927 was a bad year for my dad there. He was from a family of about 15 children, and he was the oldest one. And they lived on a farm, and of course, they couldn't help my parents. And my mother was from the Ludden, North Dakota area, and they decided to move to North Dakota. And they moved to between Oaks and Ludden, and it was called Riverdale Township. And they moved into a ratty old home across the road from a nice farm, and this nice farm was the person that hired my father as a hired hand. And at that time, there were 3 children, 2 older brothers and myself, and with my memory, I think I must have been about 2.5 or so. I don't remember that part. But my younger brother was born there, and I'm 4 years older than him, and I remember the evening he was born. And prior to that, the dirt was already starting to blow like in the 30s, and it was really, really dry. And I was a fat kid. My father said that he had to walk to another farm to work, and when the 3 older of us children would go meet him, and I would always say, "Carry me," and he'd carry me, and he said I was so heavy. But he would carry me home anyway. We lived there until my younger brother that was born, I think he must have been about 3. Then we moved to another farm across the road from another farm in this Riverdale Township area, where the pretty farm was on one side of the road, and we lived in the garbage on the other side. Anyway, it was a better home, and we were happier there. And my mother's father was about a mile from there, so we got to visit them, and he would stop and visit us. Then WPA came into being, and my father started to work for WPA, and he had to be in Ludden. We didn't have a car, so he walked 7 miles to Ludden to work on WPA and 7 miles home. We finally found a home in Ludden, and we rented that. It was the nicest house we'd lived in ever. Dad took a job on another farm in Sargent County, and this was terrible because we had to go to a one-room schoolhouse, and I was already a teenager, and I was the only girl in my class, and it was outdoor bivvy. Drink out of a bucket and share the cup with everybody else. So we moved into Oaks, and my dad got a job at the North American Creamery there, which was really a big thing at that time. And my first job was working at the creamery in the summertime. I helped make popsicles and sorted pop bottles for summer. We made good money. We had to be at work at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we got off at 3. I was pretty afraid coming into town as an only student in a little one-room schoolhouse, and it was kind of like the first 2 years of my high school. I was kind of shy and wasn't very outgoing, and the girls are required to take 1 year of home economics, and I liked it so well that I took it for 2 years. I knew I wasn't going to get to go to college, so I took home ec for 2 years and that type of thing. And then I was not a real good student in high school. I could have been if I worked. The subjects I liked, I did well, but the other ones weren't. And then we didn't date those days. I think the war started when I was about a junior. I don't remember the year the war started. Anyway, both older brothers, had to go to the service before they got to graduate from high school, but they got their diplomas anyway. And then before I graduated, I was very artistic, and I was before I even started school. I draw pictures and everything, and I loved all that type of thing. And then through the Ludden School, the teacher had us draw every picture we came to in our reading book, and I was in the 5th and 6th grade at that time. And they always got put up. And he always encouraged me to go on into something like that. But of course, in those years, how could I do anything like that? When I moved to Oaks, the one teacher took me under her wing, and I did all the artwork for high school for 4 years. Anything they needed in the artwork, I did. And that I enjoyed a lot. And then the penny manager in my senior year came to our house and asked my mother if I could work for him. So I didn't have to go look for work. So I started in senior year working for the JCPenney company, and of course my artistic skills were used as, I had to paint every sign like 3 for $2, 98, and this type of thing. You know, all those signs were hand painted. And I decorated what they called shadow boxes with all the garments and everything, and I liked that. And then I did the window trimming, plus selling. And I did that until I graduated from high school, and then about that time, the boys were coming back from World War II, and my best friend's brother was one of them. And she said, "Oh, you got to marry my brother Walt." And I said, "Well, is he tall?" "Oh, yeah, he's real tall." He wasn't, but he was real good looking, and I liked him a lot. We always liked to go to dances, and the boys would take a bunch of the girls to the dance and then bring us home. We always felt very safe that way. And when we started out, I would sit in the back. Well, there were about 5 girls would go to, you know, and pretty soon she would push me in next to him, and then she'd sit here, and pretty soon he'd drop all the girls off but me, and then it started. He was from a family of 10 children, and 5 brothers were older than him and 1 sister. So he was like the little cub guy left behind when everybody went to the field. And he was very anxious to be with the bigger boys, but he was so young yet, he wasn't. So he puttered in the machine shop all day. He would invent things. He even invented a radio that they could use in the house even. He started high school. He was smart, but it was so boring to him that he quit. And then he had to go in the service. He was in the service for 4.5 years and got 2 Purple Hearts and a few other medals. He was in the Air Force. He was stationed in Egypt, and the Germans used to strafe that airport, and that's how he got wounded twice. He was in his legs. They would crawl under a truck or something when the Germans come around, and their legs were sticking out. They got shot. And that's where the Germans had been chased out of or something, and they left old machinery and a motorcycle. He took the motorcycle and got it working. So he rode a motorcycle. They ran out of clothes for these guys. All he had was coveralls, no underwear, and no socks. So their feet got really ruined. He was the mechanic. The pilots got stuff, you know, they needed it. But they didn't have any way to wash the clothes, so he made a wash machine out of an oil barrel, and he was able to create a lot of stuff. He was a very religious guy. He was Catholic, and he maintained his faith all through the service. He ended up with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and in those days they didn't know about that. And so he hardly ever slept. He had to be doing something all the time. And he did have some bad moments where he'd cry, and he lost some good friends. We had a romance, and he was going to go to Allendale to college, and it was an industrial college. And they said, "You're not going to go to school, you're going to teach." So they hired him to teach, but of course it was a short-term course. And the farm boys didn't go to college in the summertime in those days. So he had to find work in the summertime, but he did teach 4 years there. And in the meantime, we were married, and I stayed in Oaks, and he stayed in Allendale, and I continued to work at Penny's. And we decided not to have a family until we could have a house and all this sort of thing. He was offered to teach in Wahpeton at that college at that time for industrial arts. But it was only a seasonal job again. And he always was a fisherman or hunter and whatever, so he decided maybe he'd like to go into the wildlife profession. So he had a friend that was a friend of the governor. In those days, those jobs were designated by people you liked, or so to speak. He got the job as a game warden in the Oaks area. He really liked that, and he did well with that, and I continued to work at Penny's. Then we decided, oh boy, we're okay now, we can start our family. We'd been married 5 years, so we started a family and had a daughter. I had Kathy in 1951, and the reason her name is Kathy is because when I went to school in grade school, there was a girl in the 4th grade that I thought she was absolutely the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen, and this is silly for a 1st grader to think that. She was so nice. Her name was Kathleen. I loved that name. So when my daughter was born, I named her Kathleen Marie. Lo and behold, we were transferred to Wyndmere, and we enjoyed that too because there was a lot of people our age with small children in the Catholic Church in our blocks, so we enjoyed that. And one little friend that used to come over, his name was Kenny, and he was a year older. They got along really good, Kathy and Kenny. And he'd come knocking on the door, and we'd play. And one day she come to me and she says, "Mom, can Kenny go home now?" But he came for me every day. And one time she went over there. They were just little kids, 3 and 4. And they would walk back and forth. Of course, Wyndmere is such a small town, and they didn't have to cross the main street. And they went up in the bedroom in him's house, and for whatever reason, he set the room on fire. I don't know what he did, and shut the door. And his mother called me, and Kathy had come home. And she says, "Do you know what the kids did today?" And I said, "No." And she said, "They set my bedroom on fire." But then again came this appointment thing. And so he lost his wildlife part of the job that he had, and they transferred him to fisheries in Lisbon, which he didn't like. But at the time we lived in Wyndmere, we bought a motorcycle, an Indian motorcycle with a sidecar, so we all 3 could go riding around in the summertime. He rode that all winter to Lisbon and back. Then he lost that job because they were appointed. Then his sister lived in Los Angeles, and she said, "Why don't you come out here and look for work?" Okay. So come April, we had an old van that we put a mattress in and everything else, and we took everything to Oaks and stored all our furniture, and we drove out to Los Angeles to where she lived, and they were buying a nice little house, but it was kind of a big one. When we first got there, she was working in a drive-in theater in the food part. She says, "Come on, you can have a job there too." So I went and got the job. I decided I was going to go to town in town and see if I could find a different job. She was going to work at the theater, and I was going to work in the daytime. She'd work at night. I went to Penny's, and luckily I got a job in the office there. And there were about 5 girls in the office, and then one lady was over all of us. And then she come and told me, she said, "You know, we got a letter from the Oaks Penny's store, and they said they'd never heard of you." See, I gave them that as a reference. Okay. Anyway, she says, "You would never know how to do this." So she said, the manager and I decided to keep you. You're doing a good job and you know how to do this. So anyway, but we stayed till Walt decided he did not want to live in Los Angeles. So by September, we decided to go back to Oaks. And when we arrived home in Oaks, we had stored everything at his mother's, and that's where we're going to stay a little bit. And she says, you can't live here. I said, I know that. So we were only home a couple of days, and I shampooed and did my nails and everything, and I went back up to Penny's, and I met the manager, and I said, I'm the lady from Los Angeles that you said you never heard of. He said, really? Well, he had, the managers, of course, had changed by that time, and he didn't bother to ask the girls that worked there. Anyway, I said I would like a job, and he says, you got one. And of course, we had a child, and he made the hours convenient for me that I could leave home after she left for school, and I could be home by the time she got home. We did find an apartment because my brother had lived there, and he had moved back to Madison, Wisconsin, and so we got the apartment, and it was above the variety store, and the variety store was right next door to the penny store. So it was very convenient for my daughter and everything. I could just run home for lunch and back, and that's where she started school. We were living in that apartment. We finally found a house. It wasn't a very nice one, but at least it was a house in a garage that was attached. And my husband had to find work, so he was very gifted in the radio area where he could fix radios and all that stuff, and he started fixing people's TVs and everything. And he applied with the government to the National Forest, and he got a job trial to go to Rolla, Missouri, and he went down there and was lonely, of course, and started working there. And he come home at Christmas time, and he says, I'm not going back. I said, you are, but Kathy and I will go with you. And we went to Rolla, Missouri. I'd never been there, and it was just terrible. That's a big college town, a military town, and apartments are nine-canton apartments or nothing. And we went down there, and his boss had found a mobile home park where were two travel trailers side by side. They were so awful. We stayed there about 3 nights, and then we did find a park with a mobile home that we could rent. It was really nice. It was a very, very nice one. And then we enrolled Kathy in the Catholic school, and they were very, very nice. And we happened to, a military family were living in the same park, and they had a daughter the same age as our daughter, Kathy. Walt got transferred again to Southern Illinois with the Forest Service. He was one of about, I think there were only 4 that did what he did, so he had to travel to different forests to do this work, putting, every man that went out in the forest had to have communications, a radio. Every vehicle, every airplane had to have a communications, and that's what my husband did. This is a coal mining town, full of college kids and what have you, same difference. And, but we got a nicer place to live, and I could walk to work if I wanted to, and I did get a job at Penny's there. I was put in the men's department, which I didn't really like that much. But I have to tell you this, there were black people in this community, and they had to come in the back door, which just, I couldn't believe this, what they did. These people would come in the back door, they would be spotless, their little children dressed beautifully. And I waited on one lady one time, and she says, you know, we're not allowed to try anything on. I said, I'm gonna try these shoes on your child. I said, I'm not, so I did. And the manager knew I did this, but he never said a word. I thought, how cruel can you be? His boss came to visit with us at one time in Murfreesboro, and he said, I think I got the right place for you two to live. He said, I'm going to send you to Ely, Minnesota. Oh my goodness. I thought, I'm going up to the North Pole. Anyway, So he always went ahead and got acquainted and everything and would try to rent a place for us to live. And he called me from Ely and he says, would you like to live in a nice house with a big picture window? And I said, I really would. So he says, okay, we got a place to live, then you can come. He drove up to this ratty little mobile home with a built-on shed. And so, okay, it was a place to live. We went in, and of course, it does have a stove and a refrigerator and a bathtub, but it didn't have any beds. And so we went to the Forest Service, got camping equipment, blankets and everything, and even tinware to cook and eat off of, and until our things came. So we went into Penny's to buy some winter clothes. And the manager happened to wait on us, and Walt says, she just quit Penny's, and we had to, he says, you want a job? Anyway, I said, I would, but I said, I have to get situated first, and I said, I need to be home with my daughter in the summertime. He says, we'll work it out. And in the meantime, he was transferred. So in the fall, then I went again to see if I could get work at Penny's, and lo and behold, there was a man there that had been transferred from Oaks. He'd been at the Oaks Penny store, and he was transferred to Ely, and we each had special friends, the same special friends from Oaks. So he said, yeah, I'll hire you. So I got the job again as the decorator, the window trimmer, the sign painter, the whole ball of wax, because I didn't want full-time. I said, I need to be home when she catches the bus, and I need to be home when she comes home. And I said, I probably should be home in the summertime. He says, we could work that out. So those 4 years that I worked at Penny's there, I gave up my job to a little gal that was going to college, and she'd come home, work in the summer hours, and she'd go back to school, and then I'd go back to work. It was a wonderful thing. She needed a job, and I needed to be off. So that's the summer. My husband decided he wanted to fly. So to get instructions, we had to drive to Grand Marais, Minnesota, up a trail to a lake where this man had a ratty old cub on floats. So we'd go up there for every weekend so my husband could take lessons. Then he ended up buying that rat trap. And so we had to go up there to get it. And he had never landed on wheels. They put wheels on it. And he said, I don't know if anybody's been to Ely, but a lot of the little roads, the trees in the summertime, you can't see the road from the air. Anyway, we'd come down the North Shore Drive, and then when we come into Ely, he says, make sure you don't fly ahead of me, and I said, or drive ahead of me, and I said, no. He needed to see me so he could find Ely. So I got home and we landed at Ely. The Ely airport was like, okay, where is it? It was just a kind of a grassy strip, one little long grassy strip beside the cemetery. They said, if you find the cemetery, you'll find the runway. And when we got our little old cub home, and it needed some work, and there was a man there that redid aircraft. He would take off the old covering and put on new one. And if you're not aware of that, the airplane that we bought was like a model airplane. It's made out of wood, covered with cloth, and then they paint dope on it to make it look like metal. And then they paint a color on it. Anyway, that's the way our airplane took to the airport. Then there was a man in Babbitt, Ole Clemenson. He started to be an instructor. He also had a J3 Cub. And Walt says, well, he'll finish his lessons with him. And he said, you better take lessons because in case something happens, you can get the plane down. Well, I had fallen in love with flying several years ago before I graduated from high school. We went to a carnival in Lisbon, North Dakota, where there was an airplane giving rides to people. Of course, I didn't have much money. I talked my friend into taking a ride. We went up and I just fell in love with it. And then we landed and I went again. I spent all my money on my airplane rides and I didn't have anything for a hot dog and a Coke. Getting back to Ole, he said, yeah, just try it, I'll give you a ride. So he did, and I said, yeah, I'd like to take lessons. So I started lessons that one summer. And because he worked at the mines in Babbitt, and I was working as well, and the hours were, I could only take a lesson like on weekend when he come on Saturday or something, so it took me all summer to solo. Ole was a very tall man, and he weighed close to 300 pounds. And when you're learning to fly a Cub, you sit in the seat, in the front seat. When you solo, you sit in the back seat because the engine is so heavy. Okay, you kind of think you know how it's trimmed, and you start out, and the day I soloed, he says, are you ready, Max? And I said, I'm so ready, I want to go. So he got out, and I thought I trimmed it right. I took off, and of course, boom, you know, the engine. Well, anyway, I got it trimmed, and then I flew a little further. I was enjoying it so much. I flew a little further before I got in the landing pattern, and I come in, and it was just perfect. Guess what? My husband says, why'd you fly out so far? And I said, because I liked it, and I also told him, I said, I had to get it trimmed. Anyway, I just loved it, and that little old plane was so gentle. The person that was going to check me for my license had to come from Duluth, and I was the first lady that he'd ever checked for a license in those days. So he was real proud of that. He brought his wife along and a camera and the whole thing. So he checked me out, and I did pass. We flew the Cub for a while, and then Walt decided it was too rickety, so he bought another Cub that was a little bit newer. And then we flew that, and then he bought a Champ, which is similar, only a little more powerful. And I was taking my cross country in the wintertime. So in Ely, everybody that has an aircraft puts their aircraft on the frozen Shagawa Lake. And you drill holes in the ice for your tie-down things, and you put skis on your airplane. I still had to do my cross country. Walt said it might be easier in the wintertime because the trees won't have any leaves. You'll be able to find your way home. Then we bought a Super Cruiser. This is a larger aircraft, and it carries 3 people, so Kathy could go with us. However, she didn't like it. Anyway, it was a nicer aircraft, and it had a little heater in it, and we did not put skis on that. We could fly off the frozen lake that was plowed on wheels, and that was a little nicer. In the meantime, I had gotten my commercial, and that's a little harder, and you have to do more maneuvers. So this 172 Cessna was better for that. And of course, you don't put skis on that either. Some people did, but we could land on the lake with wheels anyway. So we had the 172. It held 4 people, a heater, a radio. I was in 7th heaven, and lights. So, and I had to have nighttime. So we'd go out there, and Walt would sit on the end of the runway with the car, and I would take off and I'd do my little flying, and when I come in to land, he would step on the brakes so I knew where the end of the runway was, so I could land decent. Well, I had a light on the aircraft too, but I needed to know where the end of the runway was. And they would fly. Some nights you could see pretty good because the lake was so white, and they put little fir trees. They'd put them every once in a while, like they would be the lights along the runway, so there'd be little dark spots along the runway. So you knew. We all belong to the EAA, that's the Experimental Aircraft Association. We used to go there. Rockford, Illinois was the first place where this was created, so we got in on the floor. We met the guys that started it, and there was nothing for women then, and I was asked to help the women form a group of lady pilots so that the men would bring their wives and have a good time. In the meantime, this was transferred to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, because it had grown so huge. And we went every year for several years. And Walt, he would drive around amongst the aircraft that people had built, and he had a mic, and there'd be a crowd standing around this, and then the man would tell about the airplane that he built. It's mostly home builds, because it's called Experimental Aircraft Association, and antiques and that type of thing. So this is why we enjoy smaller aircraft. And in the state of Minnesota, you know, they always have to send out a safety person to all these little air shows to make sure all the papers are working and their aircraft is correct. Well, they decided I could do that. So they designated me to be the air show safety person for our air show company alone. And I'm the only one that ever got to do that in Minnesota, as far as we know. And so that was neat. When these guys would fly in that were going to fly in our air show, I had to check to see that their papers were all correct and everything. They had to have everything there. If they didn't bring it, they couldn't fly. And this one guy was a famous one from the air show in Oshkosh. He said, "I'm not going to have no woman check my papers." I said, "Then you're not going to fly." So he let me check his papers later, but he was so mad, you know. At one time, Oshkosh put out a report that they would like to honor somebody that has contributed a lot to the aircraft, small aircraft and experimental people. And this one young man says, "I think we should nominate Maxine and see if we can do anything." There's only 10 people in the whole world. This is a foreign deal too, you know. I mean, they come from France and all over to Oshkosh. They sent my name in. I got the plaque. There were only 10 given, and this little Duluth group was so proud, and I was so proud too, so I was happy that I was able to do that. Because of my experience, perhaps, of riding with the Forest Service guys in Ely, looking for forest fires and what have you, might have been a starter, but the airport manager, Arnie Odegaard at Cloquet, was hired to do fire patrol for the state of Minnesota. And he hired me to be a fire patrol person. I would have to start in the morning, about 8 o'clock. And I would get in the air and I'd have to call the Duluth airport. As Wood City 7, ready to go. Yeah. "Good morning, Wood City 7. We got you on the radar. Have a good day." So when they could give me permission to cross the airlines lines and whatever. However, you flew very low and very slow. And I had a route that took about 2 hours or 2.5 hours, close to 3 sometime if the wind was bad. I'd go back to Cloquet and land, have a potty stop and a sandwich, and get back up in the airplane and fly the same hours in the afternoon. I enjoyed that very much, and I did spot one fire. Otherwise, everything was clear. I did this for about 3 summers. We were close to retiring at that time. We lived in Duluth, and we decided that by the time Walt retired, we just didn't want to have anything, you know, like a home or anything. We had purchased a mobile home when we moved to Duluth and then he would get 1 month vacation, so we always took it in December, and he had to be back by January 2nd. We bought a fifth wheel, a pickup, and took off practicing before we retired. And we also practiced on how much money we'd have during that time. Then we moved into Fargo because Walt needed a veterans hospital at that time. We needed his help. And he didn't want me to go to work, so I didn't go to work. Then he says, "I'm going to buy a new Harley." And I said, "Okay." So we went out to the Harley shop and we talked to Mr. Hoffer, and Walt decided he wanted a big Harley, biggest Harley. He says, I have to have a sidecar because my legs would be a detriment to. Mr. Hopper always said, I can't get over you. He says, you were the only woman that came in with your husband and said, buy it. They all did. We don't need a motorcycle. Okay. And he remembered me, and he came to my 90th birthday party here at the park, or the Park Avenue. I was really surprised. Walt started to teach me to ride. He bought me a little old Honda, and we were going to, a bunch of us women were going to take lessons, and they had to do this by the rules of North Dakota. But the first time, we were mixed with guys. Wrong. Big bad thing. The guys got fixed, so they got to do everything, and the girls, we just were scared to ride with them. Okay, this one man was so nice. He said, I'll tell you what, you girls, I will just teach girls to ride the bike. So there was about 7 of us that started riding, and they had these, we call them mosquitoes. My best friend and I rode these little Hondas that sound like angry insects. Anyway, we laughed so much, I don't think we learned much that first lesson. But it was better. We all were okay, we passed, and but we still had to go take the state test. We asked the guys at the place if I could take the test with the sidecar, and they said, we've never done that. They had to call Bismarck to see if they could give me a test. And the guy in Bismarck says, let me know when she takes it, I want to be there. So I don't know if he was there or not, but I took the test with the sidecar. I did pass, there was no problem with that. Over the years, I got selfish and wanted my own. So we bought another big Harley and put a sidecar on there, and my husband and I traveled so much. We had so much fun with the friends and the Harley group. We'd go to Sturgis, we'd go to the National Forest and everything. We just put many, many miles on our bikes. When I first was able to ride my own bike to Sturgis, I was the oldest one that rode in there, and it seemed like on my own bike as a woman. Sturgis was something else again. The Harley group would rent a big campground part, and we all camped together, and most of us were in tents, of course. And then the shower house was near and everything, so that was very convenient. Well, this old bag went into the shower house, and all these beautiful ladies, half-dressed, were taking showers, and we didn't have much privacy. And I thought, well, what the heck? This is what you're going to look like someday. But actually, they were nice to me. But what's so cute about these girls, they get all dolled up, and then they climb behind their guy on the motorcycle, and it all goes to pot. But Sturgis was a big shock to me. When we went, it was kind of nasty yet, you know. They had parks where people would be naked and all this stuff, and some of the girls on the streets were kind of like, okay. There were benches on the streets in those days, and our friends were old like we were, and we'd sit there and watch, and we'd watch Walt and George. It was kind of a shock to me. When he couldn't ride the bike anymore, he didn't mind riding in the sidecar with me. And then he decided he wanted to try a Goldwing. So at that time, there weren't trikes made yet. And a man insisted in North Dakota had a brand new Goldwing, and he converted it to a trike for us. It was a beautiful, and I got to ride it home because Walt wasn't riding anymore. And he didn't mind riding behind me. There's pictures of him there. And at one time, he was in Villa Maria, and I went and picked him up with the trike and took him to our friends in Wheatland, North Dakota, to visit. And she took a great picture of us. And I had to take him back I had to have him back by 5 o'clock at Villa Maria. But I kept the bike for a year after Walt passed away. And I rode Bronson, Missouri with 3 other gals. I was 80, the next one was 60, 50, and 30. Bronson is very near where we used to live in Rolla. And it wasn't the fancy place then. And this is Mark Twain National Forest where Walt worked. And there was a path through that forest, and they said, this is in remembrance of Walt. So we rode through there. We had such a wonderful time. I don't remember, we were gone a whole week, I think. And then we just rode around the country and saw things, and the girls saw where I used to live and everything. And then we came back by the back roads. We don't go on the highway unless we absolutely have to, because it's so much prettier and much more fun to ride the country roads. You see more. I rode all summer, and there was a man in town that wanted to buy my bike as soon as Walt passed away. And I said, no, I'm going to keep everything for a year. I'm so glad I did. I got to ride with the Goldwing people. They are absolutely beautiful people. They aren't like some Harley people. There's lots of nice Harley people that ride too, but they had a bad name, you know, when we kind of started. And that was a different kind of riding. Very sophisticated, very high class, and very nice. And there was one couple that was so nice to me. I was riding alone a lot, and they said, they kind of rode a little bit faster than I did, and he said, I'd always slow down and wait for that black bike to catch up. That fall, that guy came and asked if I would sell the bike, and I said, yeah, I guess I will. I want to go back to Ely in the Forest Service. I used to be the artist for the U.S. Forest Service there. I painted a lot of signs on trails where you start your canoe trip. And all the rules are written on there, and I'd paint Smokey the Bear. I could do him freehand for years. And I did a lot of artwork for them. And at one time, they brought me big photographs from North Dakota, or Minnesota. There was just black and white scenery, and there is a special paint that you color them with. And this is for in Minneapolis or St. Paul, the Capitol building. They wanted those photographs colored, so I colored them for them with this special photograph stuff like they do, like my wedding picture and stuff. They turned out beautiful. Very easy, I won't tell you the secret. I did a lot of artwork at Ely. I took art lessons at the junior college, and then one summer we hired a guy from the Art Institute in Minneapolis, and his name was Urban Couch. And all his little weekend painters paid him a lot of money to stay a week. He says, we're going to have a showing of all your artwork, and you'll invite everybody for tea and everything. And then he says, at the end, I'll show you real artwork. Okay, our husbands and families and friends all came and viewed what we'd done. And then we all sat down and waited for this big show. He showed 3 things that looked like windows. They had squares in them. Pink, yellow, blue, and yellow, and blah, blah, blah. Just 3. Our husband looked at us and like, where did this guy come from? That was the beginning of the years when they started not making pictures of trees and stuff. We learned to paint a tree that looked like a tree, a building that looked like a building of water, this type of thing. And that's what I did out to Rolog. I did all their artwork out there for years. That's the end of my story.
My old man acts like a young man, puts this young man's heart in the race. His eyes are bad, His spirit is glad, he's got laughter in the lines of his face. He's an old man with a working hands, likes to stick him in the land, build up his place. Now this young man loves this old man with laughter in the lines of his face. Young man, don't you make plans, you're too busy doing. Old man, keep making plans. Teeth too old for chewing, heart too full for blueing, world too full of ruin to get caught up in the chase. He's got laughter in the lines of his face. I'm a sleepy man with calloused hands and a brain shaped like a guitar. I'll find my own path in the aftermath of a good woman's love and a falling star. I'm a simple man sucking on a rhubarb jam that I grow from plants in my backyard. Got him from an old man